My name is Sophia Lang. I'm 32 years old. For 20 years I woke up before everyone else in my house, made breakfast for 4 people, packed lunches, drove my younger sister to every audition, rehearsal, and photo shoot, and still managed to keep the family business running while my parents treated me like the unpaid manager of their lives. And the first time anyone in my family ever truly saw me was at my grandmother's will reading, when the lawyer looked at my mother and said, "Mrs. Lang, Sophia stays in the room." Those were your mother's exact instructions. The conference room went completely still. Not the dramatic kind of silence you see in movies. This was heavier. The kind where everyone suddenly realizes the roles they've been playing for decades are about to be read out loud in public. My mother, Diane Lang, had one hand on the door handle, ready to guide me back into the hallway like she'd done my entire life. My father sat at the head of the table with his usual calm authority, the expression he wore when he expected the world to fall in line. My younger sister Brooke was scrolling through her phone, legs crossed, already bored with the whole process of grief. And me? I was standing in the doorway, half in, half out, exactly where my family had always preferred me to be. Visible enough to be useful. Invisible enough to stay out of the way. "Just wait outside, honey," my mother had whispered gently, like she was protecting me. "This is family business." Family business. Those 2 words had defined my entire life. I was family enough to open the bakery at 5 a.m., close it at 9 p.m., handle the books, cover shifts when Brooke had auditions, and quietly pay bills when money got tight. But never family enough to sit at the table when decisions were made. The lawyer, Mr. Harlan, removed his glasses and looked directly at my mother. "Your mother was very specific, Mrs. Lang. Sophia remains in the room for the entire reading." My mother blinked. My father's jaw tightened. Brooke finally looked up from her phone. And for the first time in 20 years, I felt something quiet and powerful wake up inside my chest. Because my grandmother had been gone for only 8 days. And even in death she was still the only person in our family who had ever fought for me to have a seat. But before I tell you what happened inside that room, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe if you've ever been the reliable one who somehow became invisible. Drop your city and the word "invisible daughter" in the comments. I read every single one. I want to know I'm not alone here tonight. Let me take you back to where this story really began, not at the will reading, but in our kitchen 20 years ago, when I was 12 and my sister Brooke was 8. And my parents decided which of their daughters carried the dreams and which one carried the weight. Brooke was the miracle. That's what my mother called her from the day she was born. She had the face, the smile, the sparkle. Dance recitals turned into modeling gigs. Modeling gigs turned into commercial auditions. My father called her our little star. I became our dependable one. By the time I was 14, I was waking up at 4:45 a.m. to help my mother open Lang Family Bakery. I learned how to run the register, manage inventory, handle difficult customers, and still make it to school on time. Brooke slept until 8:30 because creativity needs rest. When she had auditions in the city, I was the one who drove her, waited in the lobby for hours, and made sure she had her lines memorized. When she booked a small role in a local commercial, the whole family celebrated for weeks. When I made honor roll every semester while working 30 hours a week, my father would pat my shoulder and say, "Good job, sophomore, keep it up." The pattern was so quiet, so consistent, that I didn't even notice it becoming my entire identity. I cooked dinner most nights. I cleaned the house on weekends. I covered bakery shifts when my parents wanted date nights. I gave up sleepovers, sports, and most of my teenage years because someone always needed me to be responsible. Brooke never had chores. Brooke had potential. That was the sacred word in our house. Potential. It excused everything. If Brooke left her room a mess, I was told not to nag my sister. If I left one dish in the sink, my mother would sigh and say, "Sophia, you're going to have to learn how to manage a home better than this." I was 16 the first time my grandmother, Eleanor, openly challenged it. We were at Sunday dinner. Brooke had spilled juice across the table and didn't move to clean it. My mother automatically looked at me. Before I could stand up, Grandma said from her seat at the end of the table, "Why doesn't Brooke clean her own mess? Her legs aren't broken." The table went quiet. My father tried to laugh it off. "Mom, it's fine. Sophia doesn't mind." Grandma looked at him for a long moment. "That's the problem, Thomas. She never minds. And you've all gotten very comfortable with that." Nothing changed that night. But something shifted. Grandma started paying closer attention. She began pulling me aside during visits, asking how I was really doing. She slipped me money for yourself, not the house. She told me stories about her own mother who had been the strong one in her family and died exhausted at 58. I always told her I was fine. That was the script I had been given. Last winter, when Grandma's health began to fail, I was the one who sat with her through long hospital afternoons. I brought her favorite tea. I read to her when her eyes got tired. I listened when she spoke about regrets and the things she wished she had said sooner. 3 days before she passed, she held my hand and whispered, "When they try to push you out of the room after I'm gone, you stay. Promise me you'll stay." I thought she was talking about grief. I didn't realize she had already made sure I would have no choice. Now here we were. 8 days later, in Mr. Harlan's conference room, with my mother still trying to guide me back into the hallway like I was 12 years old again. Mr. Harlan looked at her and said calmly, "Mrs. Lang, your mother left very clear instructions. Sophia stays." And just like that, the first crack appeared in the family story we had all been living inside for 20 years. If you've ever been the daughter who was useful but never celebrated, comment "useful" below. This story is for every one of us who carried more than we should have. The real revelations were still coming. And my grandmother had made sure every single one of them would be heard. But I still left one chair empty in the front row of my mind. The one with my mother's name on it. The following weekend, we began turning the workshop into something magical. Dave and Sophie arrived with truckloads of reclaimed cedar and built a dance floor right on the concrete pad where Caleb usually stored timber. Margot showed up carrying boxes of her precious vintage lace curtains from 1987, draping them across the wide bay doors so they would flutter gently in the lake breeze and soften the afternoon light into something golden and dreamlike. Caleb and Frank spent hours building a simple wooden arch at the bow of Second Chance, sanding it until the oak glowed warm and smooth under their hands. Every detail felt like quiet rebellion. While my sister had a $60,000 wedding with ice sculptures and a live string quartet, we were creating something honest for under $4,000, built by people who actually loved us. The string lights went up. The mason jars filled with wildflowers lined the rafters. The smell of fresh cut wood and linseed oil mixed with lake air created a scent I knew I would remember forever, but my mother could never leave anything alone. 2 weeks before the wedding, Aunt Patricia called me, her voice low and careful. "Ava, I need to tell you something. Your mom has been making calls. She told Uncle Richard you're having some kind of breakdown and that this workshop wedding is a cry for help. She even called Caleb's mother and suggested Caleb isn't stable enough to support a wife." The words stung, but they no longer surprised me. This was the same woman who had cropped me out of family photos for years. The same woman who had told me I would ruin my little sister's perfect day. Of course she was trying to ruin mine. That night I sat on the dock with my feet in the cool water. Caleb joined me without saying a word. After a long silence he finally spoke, "We don't have to invite her. That chair can stay empty. Or we can give it to someone who actually wants to be there." I thought about it all night. The next morning I sat at the kitchen table and wrote her invitation by hand on the same brown craft paper. I added a small sprig of dried lavender and sealed it with wax. No pressure. No begging. Just an open door. I mailed it on Monday. It came back on Thursday. "Return to sender" was written across the envelope in her elegant, cold handwriting. The envelope had never even been opened. The lavender had slipped out through a small tear. I stood at the mailbox holding it for a long time, feeling something heavy finally settle into place inside my chest. Not rage. Not devastation. Just acceptance. Some people will always choose their image over their own child. I pressed the lavender into my grandmother's old cookbook and kept the returned envelope on the shelf as a quiet reminder. Some things you don't throw away. You keep them so you never forget what you finally stopped accepting. The last days before the wedding became pure joy. Martha, Caleb's mother, drove down and took over the kitchen, baking batch after batch of her famous lemon pound cake. The whole house smelled like citrus and butter and home. While the cakes cooled, she told me stories about raising 3 boys by herself after losing her husband. "Family isn't who you're born to," she said softly. "It's who shows up when life gets hard." Her words healed something in me. The night before the wedding, the workshop looked like a dream I never knew I was allowed to have. String lights glowed against the wooden beams. Margot's lace curtains moved like breath in the breeze. The cedar dance floor smelled sweet. Wildflowers sat in mason jars everywhere. Second Chance gleamed at the front, ready to witness our vows. I walked through the space alone at twilight, reading every handwritten name card. 118 real people. People who had shown up when it mattered. And then there was the one empty chair in the front row on the right side. The name card simply read Mom. I left it exactly as it was. If you've ever left a chair empty for someone who chose not to show up, comment "empty chair" below. I see you. This story is for every one of us who finally stopped waiting. The morning of the wedding arrived soft and golden. I stood at the kitchen window watching the lake turn from silver to rose as Margot helped me into my dress, buttoning each tiny pearl button with trembling, loving hands. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see the daughter who was never enough. I saw a woman who had finally become enough for herself. The workshop filled with 118 people who had chosen to be there. The ceremony was short, heartfelt, and perfect in its imperfection. No orchestra. No ice sculpture. Just real love, real laughter, and the sound of the lake in the background. What none of us knew was that Nina had quietly filmed the entire day. And that 4-minute video was about to be seen by millions. What none of us knew was that Nina had quietly filmed the entire day. And that 4-minute video was about to be seen by millions. The morning of the wedding dawned soft and golden over the lake. I woke before the sun had fully risen and stood at the kitchen window with a cup of coffee, watching the water turn from deep silver to pale rose. Margot arrived at 7, carrying a bouquet she had picked herself at sunrise: lavender, baby's breath, white daisies, and one stem of rosemary, for remembrance. She helped me into my dress with steady, loving hands, buttoning each small pearl button up the back one by one. When she finished, she stepped back and pressed her hand to her chest. "You look like someone who finally chose herself," she whispered. Her eyes shining. I looked in the mirror and didn't see the daughter who had always been told she would ruin the atmosphere. I saw a woman standing tall in a simple ivory tea-length dress with delicate lace at the wrists. I saw someone who had stopped waiting for permission to be loved. Caleb was already at the workshop. He had texted me at 5:17 a.m. saying he needed to touch everything one last time. That was so perfectly him, making sure every detail was right. The way he restored every boat, every piece of furniture, every part of our life together. When I arrived at the workshop on Caleb's arm, 118 people were already seated. The string lights glowed even in daylight. Margot's lace curtains moved gently in the breeze coming off the lake. The cedar dance floor smelled sweet and fresh. Wildflowers in mason jars caught the light beautifully. And at the front, Second Chance waited, gleaming with fresh varnish, ready to witness our vows. I walked down the short aisle alone. Not because I had no one to give me away, but because I had already given myself to the woman I was becoming. Caleb stood at the bow of the boat in a white button-down and his one good pair of dress shoes, freshly polished. When he saw me, his eyes filled, but he didn't cry. He simply smiled, that quiet, steady smile that had always made me feel safe. Our vows were short and honest. I spoke first. "You never asked me to be smaller so you could feel bigger. You never edited me to fit your picture. You just handed me tea in the dark and sat beside me until I remembered I was enough." Caleb's voice was thick when he replied, "Ava, you taught me that home isn't a perfect house. It's the person who sees the damaged wood and still believes it can become something beautiful again." Martha cried openly in the front row. Margot held her hand tightly. Even Frank, the retired ship captain who rarely showed emotion, wiped his eyes. The ceremony lasted only 22 minutes. But it felt like 35 years of being unseen finally coming into focus. After we were pronounced husband and wife, the reception spilled naturally onto the dock and across the cedar floor. There was no formal seating chart, no assigned plates, no 5-course meal. Just long tables covered with potluck dishes: Margot's famous cornbread, Martha's lemon pound cake, Elena's caprese salad, Hank's slow-cooked pulled pork, and Coach's chili that he admitted came from his ex-wife's recipe. People danced. They laughed. They told stories. The clothesline I had strung between 2 oak trees slowly filled with handwritten notes clipped by wooden pegs. Guests wrote messages and hung them like prayers of gratitude. By sunset the line was heavy with love, real, messy, beautiful love, and through it all, the one empty chair in the front row remained. The name card still read simply Mom. Nina's camera caught it more than once. I noticed her filming but thought nothing of it. I assumed it would be for her small business article. I had no idea she was capturing something much larger. That night, as Caleb and I danced slowly under the string lights with the lake reflecting gold behind us, I felt completely at peace. I had built the day I needed instead of performing for the day my mother wanted. And it was more than enough. 3 days later, Nina called me. "Ava? The video is blowing up." I laughed. "What video?" "The 4-minute cut I made. It's already at 200,000 views. People can't stop talking about the empty chair." By that evening it had crossed 600,000. The next morning it hit 1.2 million. The internet had fallen in love with something I never meant to share with the world: the quiet courage of a woman who finally stopped shrinking herself to fit into a family picture that never had space for her. And somewhere in her perfectly decorated living room, I knew my mother was watching. And somewhere in her perfectly decorated living room, I knew my mother was watching. By the end of the 4th day, the video had crossed 2 million views. People weren't just watching our wedding, they were feeling it. The comments poured in like a river. Thousands of women sharing their own stories of being the second daughter, the one who was always told she would ruin the atmosphere, the one whose chair was quietly removed from the family table. They cried over the empty chair. They celebrated the realness of our potluck dinner and the clothesline filled with handwritten love notes. They called it the most honest wedding they had ever seen. The internet named it the Empty Chair Wedding, and the name stuck. I watched the numbers climb with a strange mixture of awe and nervousness. I had planned a small, private day for the people who truly knew us. Instead, millions of strangers were now witnessing the moment I chose myself. 3 days after the video exploded, Aunt Patricia called me again. Her voice was soft, almost reverent. Your mother watched it 7 times, Ava. She sat in her living room alone and watched it over and over. She saw the chair. She saw your name card. She cried. Real tears. Not the performance kind. The ugly, uncontrollable kind. I sat down on the dock, phone pressed to my ear, listening to the lake gently lap against the wood. What did she say? She kept whispering the same thing. That was my chair. I should have been sitting there. The words moved through me like a slow wave. Not with victory, but with a deep, aching sadness for the mother who had spent her whole life protecting an image instead of her daughter. A week later, a plain white envelope arrived in our mailbox. My mother's handwriting was on the front, but it looked different, smaller, less certain, more human. I opened it at the kitchen table with the late afternoon light pouring across the wood. Ava, I watched the video 7 times, the first time I was angry. The second time I was defensive. By the third time I started noticing things I had never let myself see before, the way people looked at you with real love, the way Caleb looked at you like you were his entire world, the way complete strangers wrote beautiful notes and hung them on a clothesline because they wanted to. And then I saw the chair, that empty chair with my name on it. Broke something in me. Because I realized it had always been there. You left space for me even when I gave you none. I don't know how to fix 35 years of being a mother who chose perfection over presence. I don't even know if I can. But I know I should have been sitting in that chair. I'm sorry. Mom. No long explanation. No defense. Just a small, trembling admission from a woman who had never admitted anything in her life. I read the letter 3 times, then folded it carefully and placed it between the pages of my grandmother's cookbook, right beside the dried lavender from the invitation she had returned. I didn't write back immediately. Some apologies need time to breathe. Some doors should stay open, but you don't have to stand in the doorway waiting anymore. 3 months have passed since the wedding. The video now sits at over 3.2 million views. The workshop has become a symbol for thousands of women who are finally choosing their own tables. Caleb is back restoring boats, happier than I've ever seen him. The string lights are still up because we like how they glow at night. And the empty chair still sits in its place in the front row, facing the lake. I never moved it. I probably never will. It isn't there as punishment. It's there as truth. There will always be space for my mother if she ever finds the courage to sit in it. But I am no longer the daughter who shrinks herself to make that space more comfortable for her. I have become the woman I once needed so desperately, the one who builds her own beautiful, imperfect, deeply real life. The one who understands that love is not something you earn by disappearing. It is something you claim by showing up fully as yourself. If you are watching this tonight and you have your own empty chair at your wedding, at your family table, or inside your own heart, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not dramatic for wanting to be loved properly. You are not cold for protecting your peace. You are not unworthy because someone failed to show up for you. You are allowed to build your own table. You are allowed to fill it with people who choose you. And you are allowed to leave one chair empty as a quiet act of self-respect. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. If it touched something deep inside you, leave the word empty chair in the comments below. Tell me about the chair you've had to leave empty. I read every single one. And if you want more stories of women who finally chose themselves, the next one is already waiting. My name is Ava Kensington, and this is what choosing yourself looks like.